My name is Margaret, I am 67 years old, and I am speaking to you from Dallas, Texas. Before I begin this story, I want you to please subscribe, like, and click the notification button so you don't miss more upcoming stories like this one. And before I continue, let me ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below because I really want to know. Now let me take you to the most painful moment of my life, the moment that broke me forever. I stood in the hospital corridor, my knees trembling, as the doctor removed his glasses and said those words that will haunt me until the day I die. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Margaret, your daughter didn't make it. She was killed by blunt force trauma to the head. We believe it was caused by her stepfather." My body froze. My ears rang. The world around me faded. I screamed so loud that even the nurses rushed to hold me. My daughter, my sweet Emily, the child I raised with my bare hands, the one I carried in my arms when her father abandoned us, was gone. And not just gone, but killed by the very man I thought would protect her. The man I trusted to stand as a husband to me and a father figure to her. I fell to the ground, clawing at my chest, crying, "No, no, no. Tell me it's not true." But the truth was staring me in the face, cold and sharp like a knife. My Emily's life was stolen. And the worst part? That monster, her stepfather, was standing in the corner, pretending to cry crocodile tears. But I could see through him. I knew in my heart he was the devil in disguise. Before I tell you how it all led to this tragedy, let me take you back to the beginning. Back to when life seemed calm. When I thought I had found happiness again after years of struggle. I was 45 years old when I met Richard. I had been single for more than a decade after my first husband walked out on me, leaving me with nothing but little Emily in my arms. She was only 3 years old then. Life was hard. I worked long hours cleaning houses, sewing clothes, and selling baked bread on weekends just to keep food on our table. Emily was my only reason to keep pushing. She was my sunshine. She never complained, not even when her shoes had holes or when I patched her school uniform for the 10th time. She would hug me and say, "Mommy, you're the best." When Richard came into our lives, I thought God had finally sent me a helper. He was charming, tall, and spoke with confidence. He owned a small construction company and seemed like a man of stability. At first, Emily didn't take to him. She would cling to me whenever Richard visited and sometimes whisper, "Mommy, I don't like him." But I thought it was just the fear of change, the way children are with new people. Richard showered me with gifts, treated me with respect in public, and said all the right things. He told me he wanted to be Emily's father, that he would never let us suffer again. And against my better judgment, I believed him. We married after 2 years of dating. The wedding was simple, in a small church with only a few friends and neighbors. Emily, who was 10 at the time, wore a yellow dress and carried flowers, but I could tell from her eyes she wasn't happy. She didn't smile in any of the pictures. If only I had listened to her silence that day. The first year of marriage was peaceful. Richard provided well, and for the first time in my life, I felt I could breathe. Emily continued her studies and showed signs of brilliance. She loved books, loved to draw, and dreamed of becoming a nurse. But slowly things began to change. Richard started drinking. At first it was just on weekends, but soon it became every night. His company began to struggle, and his frustration turned into anger. He would yell at me for small things, if dinner was late, if the house wasn't spotless. But what broke my heart was when he started directing his anger at Emily. One night she came to me in tears and said, "Mom, Richard hit me because I forgot to close the garage door." My heart raced. I confronted him and he denied it, saying she was lying to get attention. He twisted it until I began doubting my own daughter. And that was the biggest mistake of my life, doubting her. Things escalated slowly. He became controlling, not wanting Emily to go out with friends, questioning her every move. He called her lazy, ungrateful, even cursed at her. I tried to shield her, but I was too weak. I thought if I kept peace, things would get better. But peace never came. The night that destroyed my world started like any other. Emily had just turned 21. She was in college, studying nursing just like she had always dreamed. She came home for the weekend to see me, and I cooked her favorite, roast chicken with mashed potatoes. I wanted it to be a happy evening, but Richard was drunk. He started shouting about bills, about money, about how Emily was a burden. Emily stood up for herself for the first time and said, "You're not my father, and you will never be." Those words lit a fire in him. His eyes turned red, and he raised his hand. I rushed to stand between them, begging him to stop. Emily ran upstairs to her room and slammed the door. I thought it would end there. I thought he would calm down. But later that night I heard a loud thud. Then silence. I ran upstairs and opened the door. What I saw will never leave my mind. Emily lay on the floor, blood trickling from her head. Richard stood over her, holding a wooden bat, breathing heavily. "Richard, what have you done?" I screamed. He dropped the bat and said, "It was an accident," she talked back. "I didn't mean to. But I knew. I knew he meant it." His face carried no remorse, only fear of being caught. I rushed Emily to the hospital, praying, screaming, begging God not to take her from me. But by the time we arrived, she was gone. Now here I am, sitting in that hospital corridor, staring at the man who killed my child. My heart shattered, my world collapsed, and my soul burned with anger. But this was only the beginning of my fight, for Emily, for justice, for truth. Because Richard thought he could get away with it. And just as I wiped my tears and prepared to confront him in that cold corridor, something happened that shook me even more. Richard looked me straight in the eyes and whispered, "You better keep your mouth shut, Margaret, or you'll be next." I froze when those words left Richard's lips. His face was calm, almost too calm, like a predator who had already mapped out his prey. My heart pounded so hard in my chest I could hear it in my ears. My whole body shook, not only from grief but from fear. My daughter was lying dead because of him, and now he was warning me that I could be next. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw his face and tear him apart for what he had done to Emily. But at that very moment I remembered something my grandmother used to tell me. When you're standing in front of the devil, you don't fight with your fists, you fight with wisdom. I swallowed my tears, wiped my eyes, and forced myself to act as if I hadn't heard his threat. Nurses were still moving around, and the police had not yet been called. My mind raced. Should I scream for help now or wait? Should I run out of the hospital? Should I confront him and risk him attacking me right there in public?
Il chose silence.
I turned away, pretending to be too broken to respond, but inside I was planning. I was already preparing for the war ahead. The nurse asked me to come into the doctor's office to sign some papers. As I followed her, I glanced back. Richard was sitting, pretending to cry into his hands, rocking back and forth like a grieving stepfather. Anybody who didn't know the truth would have believed him. That was the scariest part. He looked so convincing. Inside the doctor's office, I broke down again. "Doctor, please tell me the truth. Was my daughter's death really an accident?" I asked, my voice trembling. The doctor looked at me, then closed the door quietly. "Mrs. Margaret," he said in a low voice, "I'm not supposed to say much until the police finish their report. But from the injuries we saw, this was not an accident. The impact was too forceful. Someone wanted to harm her." Tears poured down my face. "Then please call the police. I don't care what happens. That man is a murderer." The doctor nodded. "We've already made the call. The detectives are on their way." For a moment relief washed over me. Justice, I thought, was finally about to begin. But Richard was cunning. He saw the police cars arrive and in an instant, he transformed from the threatening monster I had just seen into a grieving widower of sorts, telling officers that Emily was like his own daughter, and that she tripped and fell during an argument. The anger in me boiled, but I bit my tongue. I let the police do their job. They took statements, bagged the bat as evidence, and promised a full investigation. Richard was not arrested immediately, something that tore my heart apart. They said they needed more proof before charging him. More proof? My daughter's blood was still fresh on the floor. That night I couldn't go home. The house where Emily died was now a prison of memories. I stayed at my friend Linda's house, trembling every time I thought about Richard being free, walking around like nothing happened. The days that followed were the lowest moments of my life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face, her last words ringing in my ears. "You're not my father, and you will never be." Those were the words that cost her life. But in the middle of my grief, something strange happened. One evening, about a week after Emily's funeral, I returned to the house to collect her belongings. The place was quiet. Richard wasn't there. He had moved to stay with a friend, while things cooled down. As I entered Emily's room, I noticed her diary on the nightstand. My hands shook as I picked it up and flipped through the pages. And then I froze. On the last pages, Emily had written something that sent chills through my spine. She had written about how Richard had been watching her, how he had once cornered her in the kitchen when I wasn't home, and how he whispered things that made her feel unsafe. The last entry read, "If anything happens to me, please know it wasn't an accident. It will be Richard. Mom, I'm scared." I fell to the floor, clutching the diary to my chest, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. My baby had warned me. She had left me her truth, but I was too blind to see it while she was alive. Just then, I heard the front door creak open. My heart stopped. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Heavy, slow, deliberate. It was Richard. He was back. And I was alone. He called out, "Margaret? Are you here?" His voice carried a dangerous calmness, the same tone he used in the hospital when he threatened me. I quickly wiped my tears and slid Emily's diary into my bag, making sure it was hidden. I couldn't let him see that I had her words. That diary was my only weapon, my only proof of his evil. I stood up, trying to act normal, but my body was shaking. He walked into the room, and his eyes locked onto mine. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled faintly, but it wasn't the smile of a husband, it was the smile of a predator. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said softly, stepping closer. "People might think you're losing your mind with grief." I took a step back, my hands clenching my bag tighter. And then, without warning, he reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was strong, painful. He leaned closer and whispered, "Remember what I told you. Keep your mouth shut, or you'll end up just like Emily." I gasped, struggling to free myself, but his grip only tightened. And at that moment, I realized, he wasn't just threatening me. He was serious. If I didn't find a way out of that house, Richard was going to kill me too. Richard's grip on my wrist was like iron. His fingers dug into my skin, and I could feel the blood stop flowing. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time since I had known him, I truly saw the monster behind the man. This wasn't grief. This wasn't sadness. This was cold-blooded evil. "Let go of me, Richard," I whispered, my voice trembling. But he leaned even closer, his alcohol-soaked breath hitting my face. "You think the police will believe you?" he said. "They already think she fell. You have no proof. If you start running your mouth, I'll make sure you end up buried next to her." Inside my bag, Emily's diary pressed against my side like a heartbeat. That little book was the only thing standing between me and death. But I couldn't let him know I had it. If he found out, I was finished. I forced myself to stay calm. I remembered again my grandmother's words about fighting with wisdom, not fists. Slowly, I loosened my body, stopped resisting, and whispered, "Richard, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm just broken. I can't think straight." His grip loosened a little, suspicion flashing across his face. "Good," he muttered. "You'd better remember that." Then, as suddenly as he grabbed me, he let go and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned and said, "You stay out of trouble, Margaret. Don't make me come back here again." The moment he shut the door, my knees buckled. I fell to the floor, clutching my wrist, sobbing silently. But along with the tears came a new kind of fire inside me. Richard thought I was weak. He thought I would stay silent. But he didn't know me. He didn't know the strength a mother gains when she has nothing left to lose. I waited until I was sure he was gone, then pulled Emily's diary back out of my bag. I kissed the cover, whispering, "Thank you, baby. You left me your voice." That night I couldn't stay in the house. I packed a few things and went back to Linda's. She saw the marks on my wrist and gasped, "Margaret, you can't keep living like this. That man is dangerous." "I know," I said, my voice shaking. "But now I have something. Emily's diary. She wrote everything. I need to take it to the police." The next morning, I went straight to the station. The detective who had been assigned to Emily's case, Detective Harris, sat me down. He was a tall man with a deep voice, the kind that made you believe he had seen too much in life. I handed him the diary. This is Emily's. Please read it. She wrote about Richard. She said if anything happened to her, it wouldn't be an accident. She named him. He flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing as he read. When he reached the last entry, he exhaled heavily and looked at me. Mrs. Margaret, this is very serious. This could change everything. Hope flickered in my heart. Finally, maybe justice was coming. But just as quickly Harris frowned. The problem is, a diary is strong, but it's not enough on its own. A defense lawyer will say it's just a young girl's imagination, or maybe a misunderstanding. We need physical proof, witnesses, something that ties Richard directly to the act beyond doubt. My hope cracked, but I held on. Then find it. Please, detective, I'm begging you. Don't let him get away with this. He nodded. We're working on it. The bat is still being tested. If we can find his fingerprints, if the blood matches, then we'll have a solid case. I left the station that day with mixed feelings. I had taken a step forward, but the road ahead was still dangerous. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying Richard's threat in my mind. I knew he wouldn't just sit and wait for the police. He was desperate, and desperate men are the most dangerous. And I was right. 3 nights later, I was alone in Linda's house. She had gone out to visit her sister, and I stayed behind. Around midnight, I heard a sound outside the window. A creak. Then another. My stomach dropped. I tiptoed to the living room, and through the curtains, I saw a shadow moving. My breath caught in my throat. Then the window latch rattled. Slowly, carefully, someone was trying to open it from outside. It was Richard. I could see his face in the moonlight, twisted with determination, his hands working on the lock. Panic shot through me like electricity. He wasn't waiting for the police. He wasn't waiting for a trial. He had come to finish what he started. And I was trapped inside, alone. My heart pounded so loudly I was afraid he would hear it through the glass. I stood frozen in the dark living room, watching Richard's hands fiddle with the latch on the window. The moonlight made his face clear enough for me to see the cold determination in his eyes. He wasn't here to talk. He wasn't here to scare me. He was here to kill me. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stop a scream from slipping out. My mind raced. Should I run to the back door? Should I hide in the bathroom? Should I call 911? But if I made a sound, he would know exactly where I was. The latch clicked. The window slowly slid upward. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the closest thing I could find. A heavy vase sitting on the coffee table, and crouched behind the couch, praying he wouldn't hear me breathe. Richard pushed the window up and slipped one leg inside, then the other. His shoes landed softly on the carpet. He stood there in the darkness, scanning the room like a hunter sniffing out prey. Margaret. He whispered. I know you're here. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but I stayed low, gripping the vase so tightly my knuckles turned white. He took slow steps forward, the floor creaking under his weight. I warned you, he muttered. You didn't listen. Tears welled in my eyes, but I forced myself to stay silent. My hand trembled around the vase, ready to swing if he came close enough. Then by some miracle my phone, hidden in my bag near the kitchen, buzzed loudly. Richard's head snapped toward the sound. He snarled, "There you are." He started toward the kitchen. I knew this was my only chance. I rose from behind the couch, lifted the vase with all the strength in my body, and charged at him. With a scream I slammed it against the back of his head. The vase shattered, pieces flying everywhere. Richard stumbled forward, groaning, but he didn't fall. Instead he turned around, his face twisted in rage, blood trickling down his forehead. "You witch!" he roared, lunging at me. I screamed and ran toward the front door, fumbling with the lock. My hands shook so badly I couldn't turn the key. He was right behind me, his footsteps pounding like thunder. Just as his hand grabbed my shoulder, I managed to yank the door open and dart outside into the night. My bare feet hit the cold concrete, and I ran screaming at the top of my lungs. Help! Somebody help me! Porch lights flicked on across the street. Neighbors peeked out of their windows. A man 2 houses down stepped onto his porch. Richard stopped in the doorway, his chest heaving. For a moment we locked eyes again. His face was pure hatred, but he didn't move forward. He knew too many eyes were now on him. Instead, he spat on the ground and shouted, "You're crazy, Margaret. You've lost your mind." Then he slammed the door shut and disappeared back into the house. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Neighbors rushed over asking what happened. I couldn't even form words. I just pointed to the house, shaking violently. The police were called, and within minutes, sirens wailed down the street. I thought this was it. I thought they would finally take him away. But when the officers arrived and searched the house, Richard was gone. He had slipped away into the night. Detective Harris arrived soon after, kneeling beside me as I hugged my knees. "Margaret," he said gently, "you're lucky to be alive. He's escalating. This isn't just about covering his tracks. He wants to silence you." I grabbed his sleeve, my voice desperate. "Please, please don't let him get away. He killed my Emily, and now he wants to kill me too." Harris nodded firmly. "We'll put out a warrant for his arrest. But Margaret, you need to be careful. Until we have him, you can't be alone. Do you understand?" I nodded, but fear still clawed at my chest. If he had already found me once, he could find me again. The police insisted on escorting me back to Linda's after searching the area. Linda returned that night, horrified by what happened. She wrapped her arms around me and said, "You're staying by my side. We'll get through this together." But deep inside, I knew things weren't going to get better. Richard wasn't the kind of man to run away and hide forever. He was the kind who would come back again and again until he finished what he started. And I was right. 3 days later, as I sat with Linda in her kitchen trying to eat, the phone rang. Linda picked it up, but her face went pale as she handed it to me. "Margaret," she whispered. "It's him." I pressed the phone to my ear, my heart hammering. Richard's voice slithered through the line, calm and chilling. "You can hide behind your friends, you can run to the police, but you can't escape me. If you don't drop this, you won't live to see the trial." My hand shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. And then the line went dead. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the kitchen table. My whole body trembled as Richard's words echoed in my head. "You won't live to see the trial." Linda grabbed my shoulders, her eyes wide with fear. "Margaret, you can't keep living like this. He's going to kill you if the police don't act fast." I buried my face in my hands. He already killed Emily. And now he wants me gone too, just to cover up his evil. "But I won't let him win, Linda. I can't." Linda pulled the phone back toward her and called Detective Harris immediately. Within 20 minutes, he arrived at her house with 2 officers. His expression was grave as he listened to what happened. "This confirms everything," Harris said firmly. "He's stalking you, Margaret. He's desperate. That makes him dangerous, but it also means he's slipping. He's leaving a trail." I gripped Emily's diary tightly against my chest. "Please tell me this is enough to lock him up." Harris sighed. "We're close." The blood test on the bat came back. "It's Emily's. The problem is, Richard's fingerprints weren't found clearly enough. He wiped it down. But with the diary and these threats, we can build a stronger case. What we need now is one more piece of undeniable proof." My frustration boiled over. "How much more proof do you need? He killed my daughter. He's threatening me. Do I have to die too before something is done?" Harris placed his hand gently on mine. "Margaret, I promise you, we're not going to let that happen. But I need you to stay strong. Stay protected. And trust me, we're closing in on him." The officers set up a patrol car outside Linda's house, promising to keep watch at night. For the first time in days, I felt a small flicker of safety. But still I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me jump. Every passing shadow outside the window made me hold my breath. That night, I sat awake clutching Emily's diary. I flipped through her writings again, as if hearing her voice could give me courage. One entry stood out. "Mom always thinks I'm strong, but sometimes I just wish she could protect me the way she used to when I was little. I'm scared she doesn't see what Richard really is." Tears blurred my vision. "I see it now, baby," I whispered. "And I promise I'll protect you even in death. He will pay." The next day, Harris called me with news. "Margaret, we've located Richard. He's hiding at a motel just outside the city. We're preparing to move in on him. But I need you to be ready in case he tries to contact you again. Don't answer. Call me directly. I nodded, relief washing over me. So you're going to arrest him? Yes, Harris said firmly. But we want him alive. If he runs, it could get messy. I thanked him and hung up, finally feeling like justice was close. But that sense of relief didn't last long. Later that evening, while Linda and I were cooking dinner, the house phone rang again. I froze, staring at it. Linda reached for it, but I grabbed her hand. Don't, I whispered. Let the machine take it. The answering machine clicked, and Richard's voice filled the kitchen. His tone was darker, colder than ever. You think the police can save you? You think you're safe with your little diary? Margaret, I see you. I know where you are. You can't hide from me. And when the time is right, I'll finish what I started. The line went dead. Linda gasped, covering her mouth. He knows where we are. I clutched my chest, struggling to breathe. My eyes darted to the windows, the doors, every corner of the house. It felt like he was watching me, lurking in the shadows. I called Harris immediately. He listened quietly, then said, Margaret, this changes everything. He's not just threatening you now. He's taunting you. Stay calm. Keep the doors locked. I'll send a team right away. But before the officers arrived, before Harris could reach us, something happened that nearly stopped my heart. As I stood in the living room trying to steady my breathing, I glanced out the front window. There he was, Richard, standing across the street under a streetlight, staring directly at me. His face was twisted into a smile, his hands buried in his jacket pockets. He didn't move. He just stood there watching me. I screamed and stumbled back, pointing at the window. Linda! It's him. He's right there. Linda rushed to the window and gasped. Oh my God. I grabbed the phone again, dialing Harris frantically. He's here. He's outside the house. Harris's voice sharpened. Stay inside. Do not confront him. Officers are 2 minutes away. Hold on, Margaret. But Richard didn't wait for the officers. The smile on his face widened. And then slowly, deliberately, he pulled something from his jacket. A knife. The blade glimmered under the streetlight. And he started walking toward the house. The moment I saw the knife glint under the streetlight, my legs nearly gave way. My heart hammered in my chest so loudly I could barely hear Linda screaming beside me. He's coming, Margaret. He's coming, she cried, fumbling with the phone to call 911 again, though I had Harris still on the line. Listen to me, Margaret. Harris's voice boomed through the receiver. Stay away from the doors and windows. Get to a safe place in the house right now. Officers are seconds away. But seconds felt like eternity when a killer was marching straight toward you. I grabbed Linda's hand and pulled her toward the back of the house. We rushed into the laundry room, the closest place we could lock ourselves inside. I slammed the door, twisted the lock, and pushed the washing machine against it with all the strength left in my body. The sound of Richard's footsteps grew louder outside. Then came the rattling of the doorknob at the front of the house. My breath hitched. Margaret! Richard's voice thundered through the door. Open up, or I swear I'll carve my way in. Linda whimpered, covering her mouth to keep from screaming. I held her close, whispering, Don't make a sound. Just hold on. Then came the crash, glass shattering in the living room. He had broken a window. He was inside. My entire body shook as I pressed my ear to the laundry room door. I could hear his footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy. Margaret, he called out, his voice mocking sing-song. Come out, wherever you are. Tears ran down my face as I clutched Emily's diary in my arms like a shield. God, please, I prayed silently. Don't let him end me the way he ended my baby. Richard's footsteps drew closer, echoing down the hallway. The house seemed to hold its breath. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a death sentence. Then his shadow fell across the bottom of the laundry room door. I could see it moving back and forth through the thin gap. He stopped. Silence. And then bang. He kicked the door so hard the washing machine shook. Linda screamed into her hands. My knees buckled, but I pressed my back against the machine, pushing with everything I had to keep it from sliding. Another bang. The lock groaned. Margaret, he roared. This is your last chance. Just as I thought the door would splinter open, Red and blue lights flashed through the cracks in the boarded-up laundry window. Sirens wailed outside. Police! Drop the weapon! Richard cursed under his breath. The sound of his footsteps retreated quickly, pounding toward the back door. I yanked the laundry window open just enough to see officers flooding the front yard, guns drawn, shouting orders. Richard burst out the back door, knife still in hand. The officers turned immediately, chasing him into the yard. "Stop right there," one shouted. But Richard didn't stop. He bolted through the fence like a wild animal, disappearing into the dark. Shots rang out, warning shots, not hits. I collapsed onto the laundry room floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Linda hugged me, her tears mixing with mine. "It's over, Margaret. It's over." But I knew it wasn't over. Richard had escaped again. Minutes later, Detective Harris stormed into the house, his face tight with frustration. He crouched beside me, gripping my shoulder. "You did the right thing. You stayed alive. That's all that matters right now." I looked at him with wild, desperate eyes. "He's never going to stop, Detective. Don't you see? He'll keep coming until one of us is dead." Harris's jaw tightened. "Then we'll make sure it's not you. I swear, Margaret, we will catch him." But even as he said those words, I could see the doubt flicker in his eyes. Richard was smart. Richard was slippery. And Richard was determined. The officers stayed through the night, searching the neighborhood, but by morning, there was no trace of him. No footprints, no knife, no jacket, nothing. It was as if the darkness had swallowed him whole. And then the next day, something arrived in the mail. A small brown envelope with my name scrawled across it in Richard's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, Emily on the night she died, lying lifeless on her bedroom floor. The picture had been taken before I found her. And on the back of the photo, written in red ink, were 4 words. "You're next, Margaret." The photograph trembled in my fingers like a small, cold heart. Emily's face looked so peaceful in the picture. Her eyes closed, hair fanned out, the same soft expression she wore when she slept as a child. Seeing her like that in a glossy print made my stomach drop. It was proof he had been watching her even after he killed her. It was proof he had wanted me to see the last moment of my baby's life. I pressed the photo to my lips and whispered, "Oh, Emily, why did you have to go?" Then I looked at the back and reread the 4 red words. "You're next, Margaret." Every sound in the house felt too loud. The drip of the sink, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock. I felt sick, like someone had opened my chest and taken away whatever left of my courage. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the photograph. Linda saw my face go white and took the picture from me gently, as if handling something holy. "Margaret," she said softly, "we need to tell Harris. He needs to see this." My voice came out as a croak. I nodded and we both went to the police station. Detective Harris met us in the small interview room. He looked tired but his voice was steady. He studied the photograph and the note the whole time, lips pressed thin. "This is cruel," he said finally. "He's trying to break you. He wants you to be scared." "He already broke us," I said. "He broke Emily. You must find him. Please, please find him." My voice broke and I buried my face in my hands. Harris laid the photo on the table like evidence in a case he had to solve. "We will keep this safe," he promised. "We'll check the photo for prints and see if we can trace where it was developed. There may be fibers or paper marks that lead us somewhere." He left no stone unturned. At least, I thought he didn't. But the thing about fear is that it sits in your bones. Even when the police work hard, the fear stays. That night the patrol car still sat outside Linda's house, but instead of making me feel safer, it made the fear louder. It reminded me that the world was now split in 2 parts. The part before Emily died and the part after, where I watched every shadow and jumped at every noise. Days blurred into one another. Detectives came and went. They took my statements again and again. They questioned neighbors, checked cameras and called every motel in the county. They found a half-scratched boot print near the back fence and matched a partial DNA from under Emily's nails to skin cells that belonged to Richard's distant cousin, someone who had visited the house months before. It was something, but it wasn't the full thread we needed to wrap him up. What hurt more than anything was how alone I felt in the middle of all that help. People would say, "We are with you," and then go home. They brought casseroles and flowers for a week, and then they were busy again. Linda was my rock. Detective Harris was my ally. But every night I still dreamed of Emily. Heard her small laugh, saw her crooked smile. In the daytime I tried to be busy, to keep my hands moving, to stop my mind from drifting back to the photo. One morning, as I sat in the kitchen with a coffee I could not taste, my phone lit up with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I nearly didn't answer it, but something inside made me pick up. "Hello." The voice on the other end was thin and shaky. "Mrs. Collins? My name is Sarah Blake. I think I have something that belongs to your daughter." My throat closed. "What? Where are you?" "I found a bracelet near the river behind the old quarry. It had a name charm with Emily on it. I thought it might be hers. I didn't know where else to send it, so I called the station and they told me to contact you." My heart leaped and then sank because I knew how often a hope can turn into a cruel trick. But Emily had worn a small silver bracelet her whole life. I rubbed my thumb along the inside of my palm like an animal searching for a scent and then said softly, "Please bring it by. I will come." When Sarah arrived, she looked young and nervous. She handed me a little paper bag with a simple bead bracelet inside. My hands moved of their own will as I pried it open. The charm read M in tiny letters. I held it to my nose and tried to breathe. "It's hers," I whispered, and I don't know if it was my words or my tears that convinced Sarah. She sat down and began to tell me what she had seen the day she found it. "I come here to walk my dog every morning," she said. "It was early, fog heavy like a blanket. I saw something small glinting in the mud. When I picked it up I felt like the world tilted. I've been following the news, Mrs. Collins. I thought you might want this." Her voice was soft and kind. She didn't know the whole story. She knew only that someone had lost something precious. I clutched the bracelet like a lifeline. Detective Harris had the bracelet tested. The clasp had a microscopic trace of blood that matched Emily. There were also small traces of soil that matched the embankment near the quarry, soil the police had not matched to anything yet. That small finding twisted my hope like a knife. If the bracelet had been at the quarry, it meant someone had taken Emily's body there, or at least had been there with something that belonged to her. It meant Richard, or someone connected to him, had been to that lonely place. We didn't have to wait long. A pattern started to appear. A week later, another neighbor, old Mr. Jensen, came forward with a description of a small green van he had seen on the night Emily died. He had written the license number down, thinking it was nothing. The detectives ran it through the system and found that the van had been rented by a company that occasionally supplied laborers to Richard's construction crews. When Harris told me, I felt like I had been given something to hold on to. The pieces were coming together, but they were not the pieces I wanted because each one showed the depth of Richard's planning. He had not only killed Emily, he had tried to hide her, to send me messages that he could reach me no matter where I was. He wanted me to know he could touch my life even after taking the most precious part of it. One late afternoon, Harris came to my house with papers and an expression I had seen before on his face. The same look he wore when he believed they had a real lead. "We have a warrant," he said. "We can search Richard's storage unit and his business lot. If he used the van, there will be traces. Bring the diary with you, Margaret. We're going to treat everything as evidence." My hand shook as I tucked Emily's diary into my jacket. It had become my Bible, my proof, my memory. As we drove to the storage facility, my mind wandered to places I didn't want to go. Visions of the quarry, of the van, of what they might find. Detective Harris kept talking, giving me the solid facts of police procedure, but inside I felt hollow and strange, like a shell with the wind moving through it. The storage facility was a maze of locked doors and padlocks. The officers walked the rows with flashlights and steady hands. When they found Richard's unit and cut the lock, I stood several steps back, watching through a small crowd of officers and technicians. The air smelled like oil and old paper. They opened the door. My breath hitched. Inside was a mess: lumber, old furniture, plastic tubs. They started pulling things out carefully. I watched with a small, sick hope and a larger, cold fear. Then one of the technicians called out, "Here, this might be it." He held up a small, worn duffel bag. It had a faded logo and a dark stain along one seam. My stomach dropped. The officers unzipped it. Inside, wrapped in a dirty tarp, was a small bundle of cloth. The room went silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Harris stepped forward and gently unfolded the cloth. My hands flew to my mouth. It was a child's blanket. One of those cheap, colorful blankets Emily used to drag around the house when she was little. It had a tear at the corner and a tiny frayed ribbon that I had sewn into the edge years ago. I knew that ribbon the way I knew the creases of my own palm. Detective Harris called for the coroner and a full processing team. They handled everything with care, calling in specialists. The moment I saw that blanket, something inside me cracked like thin ice. Images came without asking. Emily as a toddler, bundling herself in that blanket, falling asleep on the couch. And then the knowledge that the blanket had been hidden here. Hidden by someone who wanted to erase her. Harris knelt down and spoke softly. "We'll get answers, Margaret. But we need to be careful. We'll take this to the lab." He looked at me with tired eyes. "I'm so sorry." A terrible sinking sense of certainty settled over me. The discovery meant one thing. They had found something that tied Emily to Richard's property. It was the closest thing to a chain linking him to what happened. I felt relief and dread at the same time, because I knew what came next. As we were waiting for the coroner's team to arrive, a noise came from the far end of the storage lot. A low metallic sound like a vehicle idling. Heads turned. Flashlights swept the rows. The night felt too thick. Harris motioned to officers to secure the perimeter and moved toward the sound. My heart hammered in my throat like a trapped bird. A dark van eased into the lot, its headlights off, the engine whispering. It pulled up near the storage units and stopped. I saw movement inside. Someone hunched in the driver's seat. The officers tensed, fingers on holsters. Harris raised his hand and stepped forward, calling out, "Police! Step out of the vehicle with your hands where we can see them." The van door slid open slowly, and there, standing in the dim light, was a man I had never expected to see. One of Richard's oldest friends, someone who had smiled at our wedding, who had helped fix a sink in our first years of marriage. He tilted his head and looked at us with a half-smile that made my skin crawl. "Good evening," he said, as if he were greeting neighbors at a barbecue. My mouth went dry. Behind him, in the back of the van, something moved. Wrapped tight in plastic, dark and still. The officers froze. My hands flew to my mouth again. Before anyone could shout, the man smiled that same slow smile and reached inside his jacket. Everything happened at once. A flash, a shout, a single terrible pop, and then pain. Hot, bright pain blossomed across my shoulder like a brand. I hit the ground. The world tilted. Someone shouted my name. The ground smelled like dust and oil and blood. I had not expected to be hurt that night. I had expected arrests and answers. I had not expected the sudden, sharp cut of a gun. As my vision blurred, the last thing I saw before everything shuddered into black was the man's face leaning toward me, and the van's rear door swinging wide to show the terrible, small shape bundled inside. When I woke up, the first thing I heard was the steady beeping of a machine. The sharp smell of disinfectant stung my nose. My arm felt heavy, my shoulder burned, and when I tried to move, pain shot through me like fire. Slowly I opened my eyes. White ceiling. Fluorescent light. The steady hum of air conditioning. I was in a hospital bed. "Margaret, you're awake." It was Linda's voice. I turned my head and saw her sitting beside me. Eyes red, face pale. She grabbed my good hand and squeezed it so tight I thought she might break it. "You scared me," she whispered. "You scared me half to death." I blinked, trying to put the pieces together. The van. The man. The gun. The sharp crack. The pain. My heart began to race as memories crashed over me. "Emily's blanket," I croaked. "The van, what happened? Where is he?" Linda shook her head quickly. "Don't talk too much. Harris will explain everything when he comes. Just rest." But rest was impossible when I remembered what I saw in the back of that van. Something wrapped in plastic. Something small. Something still. The beeping machine quickened with my heart rate. Linda rubbed my arm trying to calm me, but I couldn't stop trembling. The door opened and Detective Harris stepped in. His usually neat hair was a mess, his shirt untucked and his eyes bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept since the night I was shot. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. "Like I've been hit by a train," I whispered. "Tell me what happened. Don't hide it from me, Harris. I saw something in that van." He pulled up a chair and sat close, lowering his voice. "We arrested Richard's friend, Samuel Price. He was the one driving the van. He fired at the officers and you were hit in the crossfire. The bullet grazed your shoulder. It could have been much worse." I swallowed hard. "And the van? The bundle in the back?" Harris hesitated. His eyes flickered and I knew what that meant. "Please," I begged. "Don't lie to me. Was it my Emily?" He took a deep breath. "We found human remains, Margaret. But they were badly decomposed. We won't know for sure until DNA testing confirms it. It could take weeks." Tears slid down my face. Weeks? I had already been waiting for answers since the night Emily died. My heart couldn't take weeks more. "But," Harris added quickly, "we did find something else." Inside Samuel's pockets was a note, written in the same handwriting as the one you got in the mail. It said, "Deliver the package. Don't fail me." It was signed R. Richard. So he wasn't working alone. He had allies, friends, men who would kill for him. I shivered so hard the bed rattled. "He's building an army," I whispered. "He won't stop until he destroys me." Harris leaned forward. "Listen to me, Margaret. We're closer than ever to nailing him." With the blanket, the bracelet, the photo, and now the remains, we have more evidence than he can run from. This is the beginning of the end for him. But I wasn't so sure. The news spread quickly. Reporters camped outside the hospital. They called me the grieving grandmother, the brave survivor, the key witness. Strangers sent flowers and cards. But none of it mattered. None of it could fill the emptiness where Emily's laughter used to be. That night, when Linda went home to shower and rest, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I kept seeing Samuel's smile before he pulled the trigger. That eerie calmness. That quiet confidence. It told me one thing. Richard had promised him something. Something worth killing and dying for. The next day, Harris returned with more news. "Samuel won't talk. He's protecting Richard. But we found a key in his wallet. It belongs to a cabin upstate." My stomach clenched. "A cabin?" Harris nodded grimly. "We're heading there tonight. I wanted you to know because if we find what we think we'll find, it may be the last piece of the puzzle." I gripped his hand, my voice low and fierce. "Bring him back in chains, Harris. Promise me." He didn't answer. He just squeezed my hand and walked out. Hours later, I turned on the small hospital TV to distract myself. The local news was broadcasting live from the woods. Reporters whispered about an intense manhunt near a cabin. My chest tightened as I watched flashing lights dance through the trees. Then suddenly the camera cut to chaos, shouts, movement, a swarm of officers. And through the blur I saw him. Richard. Not in chains. Not in cuffs. Not caught. But standing in the doorway of the cabin, smiling. And in his hand he held a photograph. Even through the grainy TV screen I knew what it was. It was Emily again. Only this time her picture wasn't of her lying on the floor. It was of her standing, smiling. Taken weeks before her death. Richard lifted it high like a trophy and shouted something the microphones barely caught. But I heard it. I heard it clear. "Margaret, she's still mine." The screen went black as the police cut the feed. My scream filled the hospital room. The hospital room became a cage that night. My body was weak, but my mind was a raging storm. Richard had shown himself in front of the entire state, taunting the police, taunting me. He wanted the world to know that he still held power. He wanted to rip away what little peace I had left. The news anchors replayed the blurry footage again and again, analyzing every shadow, every gesture. Why did he show a picture of Emily? Was it proof of control? Was it a signal to someone else? They asked. But I didn't need their theories. I knew Richard. I knew his cruelty. That photograph wasn't random. It was a message. It meant he wasn't done with me. Detective Harris came to see me the next morning, his face hard, his jaw clenched. He looked more like a soldier now than a detective. We searched the cabin, he said, pulling up a chair. It was a hideout. Stockpiles of canned food, weapons, surveillance equipment. He's been preparing for this for a long time. He left behind maps, notes, and photographs. My stomach twisted. Of Emily? Harris shook his head grimly. No. Of you. The air left my lungs. He slid an evidence envelope onto my lap. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were several photos. Me walking to the grocery store, me sitting on my porch, me through the hospital window while I was sleeping. My vision blurred with tears. He's been watching me all this time, I whispered. Harris's voice was firm. Margaret, listen to me. This is obsession. Men like Richard, they don't stop until they're forced to. But now we know his game. And we're not playing anymore. We're taking him down. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to cling to his certainty like a rope. But the fear in my bones whispered otherwise. Richard was always 2 steps ahead. That night, unable to sleep, I opened Emily's diary again. Her neat handwriting seemed to glow on the page. Mom, I don't trust him. He looks at me too long. Like he's waiting for me to do something wrong. Sometimes I hear him outside my door when I'm trying to sleep. If anything happens to me, promise you'll tell people the truth. Promise you won't let him win. Her words burned into me. I clenched the diary to my chest. I promise, baby, I whispered into the dark. I won't let him win. The next day, Harris returned with an update. We've tracked Richard's movements. He's been using Samuel's identity, credit cards, phone numbers. He's clever but not perfect. We think we've cornered him in a small motel near the state border. My heart raced. Then go, I urged. Go now before he slips away again. Harris nodded. We already have a team on the way. But I need you to understand. He might try to use you again. To send another message. His words turned prophetic just hours later. Linda had stepped out to grab me dinner from the cafeteria. I was alone in the hospital room, staring out the window at the rain, when the phone beside my bed rang. I hesitated before answering. Only a handful of people knew this number. Hello. At first silence. Then a slow, familiar laugh. My blood turned to ice. Margaret. Richard's voice was low, mocking, almost tender. You really thought they could protect you in that little white room? You thought walls and locks and police would save you? My throat went dry. You monster. You killed Emily. You destroyed her life. She was never yours, he hissed. She was mine. And now you're mine too. I slammed the receiver down, my hands shaking so badly it clattered against the table. My chest heaved as I pressed the nurse call button again and again until someone rushed in. By the time Harris arrived, the hospital staff had traced the call. It came from a payphone 2 blocks away. He had been that close. I gripped Harris's arm, my nails digging into his sleeve. He's not running, detective. Don't you see? He's circling me. He's hunting me. And one of these nights, he's going to finish what he started. Before Harris could answer, the intercom crackled overhead with an announcement. Code Black. Code Black. All staff to emergency exits. The lights flickered. The hospital plunged into chaos. Nurses ran down the halls. Alarms blared, and in the confusion, a chilling thought gripped me. This wasn't an accident. This was him. Richard was inside. The hospital sirens wailed like banshees, red lights flashing against the walls. Nurses rushed patients on rolling beds down the halls, orderlies barked orders, and the intercom kept repeating, Code Black. All staff to emergency exits. But I knew better. This wasn't a fire. This wasn't a drill. This was Richard. I clutched Emily's diary against my chest and pushed myself upright, ignoring the pain that ripped through my shoulder. My heart thundered in my ears as the chaos swirled outside my room. Detective Harris burst through the door, gun already drawn, his face grim. We have to move, Margaret. Now. He's here, isn't he? My voice shook. Harris nodded once. Security cameras caught him slipping in with a delivery crew. He's armed. He cut the power to the lower floors. For a moment, my knees buckled. I could almost see Richard's smile in my mind, hear his mocking voice. He had walked right into my safe place. Linda ran in behind Harris, her face pale. Margaret, come on. We have to go. Harris pulled me to my feet, his hand steady but firm. We're getting you to the secure wing. Stay behind me. The hallways were chaos. People screaming, alarms blaring, the smell of burning wires filling the air. We pushed through, Harris scanning every corner, every shadow. Then bang! A gunshot ripped through the corridor. Nurses screamed and ducked. A window shattered behind us. My legs gave way, but Harris yanked me forward. Keep moving, he shouted. We turned a corner, only to stop dead in our tracks. Richard. He stood at the far end of the hallway, calm as ever, gun in one hand, something small and square in the other. My stomach twisted, it was another photograph. Margaret, he called, his voice echoing over the chaos. Running won't change anything. You belong to me. He lifted the photo high, showing me Emily's face again. Only this time the picture wasn't of her dead or smiling. It was of me, taken in that very hospital bed, asleep. A chill crawled down my spine. He had been here. He had stood in my room. He had taken that picture while I was vulnerable. Harris raised his weapon. Drop it, Richard. Drop it now. But Richard only laughed, a sound that made my blood run cold. He took a step forward. Harris fired, bang. But Richard ducked into the stairwell, disappearing like a shadow. Move, Harris ordered, pulling me and Linda toward the opposite stairwell. We stumbled down 2 flights, my shoulder screaming in pain. Every sound, every echo, I thought was him. At one point, I swore I heard his voice whispering through the vents. You can't hide, Margaret. Finally, we reached the secure wing, a fortified section with locked steel doors. Harris shoved us inside, shouting at the guards to seal it. My body trembled as the doors clanged shut. I collapsed into a chair, clutching Emily's diary so hard the edges cut into my palm. But even behind those heavy doors, I didn't feel safe. Because Richard wasn't running anymore. He wasn't hiding. He was hunting me. And I knew, deep in my bones, the next time we crossed paths, one of us would not walk away alive. The secure wing of the hospital was supposed to be impenetrable. Thick steel doors, armed guards, and cameras in every corner. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My eyes darted to every flicker of shadow. My ears strained against every hum of electricity. Because if Richard had proved anything, it was that walls and locks didn't keep him out. Detective Harris stayed by the door, gun drawn, radio crackling in his hand. All units, sweep every floor. He's inside the building. Do not let him escape. His voice was steady, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Linda knelt beside me, gripping my hand. You're safe now, Margaret. He can't get in here. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to cling to her words like a lifeline. But deep down my soul knew better. Richard wasn't going to stop until he was standing right in front of me. Suddenly, the lights flickered again. The monitors in the secure wing buzzed with static, then blinked off. The room plunged into a dim glow of emergency power. A low hum filled the air. The guards cursed and adjusted their rifles. Harris barked into his radio, but only static answered back. Then, through the silence, came a sound I will never forget. A slow, steady knock. On the steel door. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. The guards raised their weapons. Harris motioned for silence, then called out, "Identify yourself." No answer. Instead, a folded photograph slid under the door, pushed by unseen fingers. My stomach turned to ice. Harris bent down and picked it up. His eyes darkened as he turned it over and handed it to me. It was a photo of me and Emily, taken years ago at her birthday party. She was blowing out her candles, and I was laughing beside her. But someone had drawn a thick red X over Emily's face, and underneath, scrawled in that same handwriting, were the words, "One candle left to blow out." Tears stung my eyes. My breath came in ragged gasps. He was mocking me. Mocking the one happy memory I had left. Suddenly, the steel door shuttered with a loud clang. He was trying to force it open. The guards braced against it, shouting. Harris yelled, "Hold the line!" The sound of grinding metal echoed through the hall. Richard was using something, maybe a tool, maybe pure rage, to bend his way in. "Get her out of here." Harris barked at Linda. "Through the back exit now." Linda pulled me to my feet, but my legs were weak. My shoulder screamed with pain. We staggered toward the back door, but before we reached it, the steel door burst open. Richard stood in the frame, eyes wild, face twisted in a sick smile. In one hand, a knife gleamed under the dim light. In the other, he held a small box. "Margaret," he said softly, almost lovingly. "Did you miss me?" The guards fired. Chaos exploded. The box fell to the floor, clattering open to reveal scraps of photographs and Emily's bracelet. Richard lunged forward like a beast. Harris tackled him, the knife flashing dangerously close. Linda screamed. I froze, clutching Emily's diary like a weapon, though it was nothing but paper and ink. The struggle was fierce, brutal. Richard snarled like an animal, his knife slicing the air. Harris fought with everything he had, but Richard was strong, too strong. And then Richard's eyes locked on me. "I told you," he hissed, shoving Harris aside, stumbling toward me with the knife raised. "You're next, Margaret." Time slowed. My whole life flashed before me. Emily as a baby, Emily laughing in the park, Emily whispering secrets in the dark. I looked down at the diary in my hands. Emily's last words echoed in my head. "Promise you won't let him win." I stood tall, tears streaming down my face, and whispered, "I promise." Richard lunged. A deafening gunshot split the air. Richard froze, eyes wide. Blood blossomed across his chest. He dropped the knife, stumbled, and fell at my feet. Detective Harris stood behind him, gun still smoking. His hands trembled, but his voice was steady. "It's over, Margaret. He'll never hurt you again." I collapsed to my knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Linda wrapped her arms around me as the guards secured the room. Richard lay lifeless on the floor, his twisted smile finally gone. I looked down at Emily's diary, stained now with his blood, and whispered, "Rest now, baby. He can't reach us anymore." But even as I said it, a small voice inside me wondered, could a man like Richard ever truly die? Or had he already left his darkness inside of me, forever haunting my every breath? The world outside my hospital room seemed to move on quickly. Reporters crowded the streets, cameras flashing as they tried to capture the aftermath of Richard's death. The news stations ran headline after headline. Stepfather killed after violent hospital attack. Grandmother survives horrific ordeal. Justice for Emily? But inside me, nothing was over. I sat by the window, staring at the horizon, clutching Emily's diary as if it were the only thing keeping me breathing. Harris had saved me. Richard was dead. And yet, I couldn't stop hearing his voice. "You belong to me." The hospital psychiatrist tried to reassure me. "Trauma does that," she said gently. "Your mind replays what you fear most." But it wasn't just in my mind. Because 2 nights after Richard's death, I woke up to find a new photograph on my nightstand. It wasn't there when I fell asleep. The picture was of Emily again, but this time, someone had drawn me kneeling at her grave. And underneath, in the same jagged handwriting, were the words, "Death doesn't end love." I screamed so loudly that nurses came rushing in. Harris arrived minutes later, his face pale when I showed him the photo. He ordered the entire floor searched, every guard questioned. But no one had seen anything. No cameras had caught anyone entering my room. Linda gripped my hands, her voice trembling. "Margaret, what if Richard wasn't alone?" The thought chilled me to my core. Could he have had an accomplice? Someone helping him even now? Harris didn't dismiss it. In fact, he looked more troubled than ever. "It's possible," he admitted. "If that's true, then this isn't over." I wanted to scream, to cry, to collapse under the weight of it all. But then I remembered Emily's words. "Promise you won't let him win." So instead, I straightened my back, wiped my tears, and whispered to Harris, "Find them. Whoever they are. Find them before they finish what he started." But even as I said it, deep down, I feared the truth. What if the accomplice wasn't just some stranger? What if it was someone close to me? Someone who already had my trust? The question gnawed at me like a blade in the dark, leaving me sleepless, restless, and afraid of every shadow. And then, on the very day they discharged me from the hospital, I walked into my house for the first time in weeks. On my dining table sat a single envelope. No stamp. No name. Just waiting for me. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a fresh photograph, me, standing at the hospital window just 3 nights ago. And scrawled across it in red ink were 3 words. See you soon. My knees buckled. My heart pounded. My worst fear had come true. Richard was gone. But his ghost, or his accomplice, was still out there, watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. The photograph on my dining table burned my hands like it held a coal. I sat with it for what felt like hours, tracing the outline of my own silhouette with a shaking finger, trying to convince myself it was some cruel prank. But the picture was too precise, taken from a certain angle only someone who knew the hospital layout, or someone who had been inside, could have taken. Whoever was watching me had access. Whoever was watching me knew my routines. Fear has a way of changing the world's small things into threats. The way the mailbox clanged, the creak of floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator. All of it became a chorus telling me I was not alone. I wanted to call Harris. I wanted to wrap myself in blankets and never leave the house again. Instead, I did the thing traumas teach you to do. I breathed, counted to 10, and moved forward. If I let fear pull my strings, Richard would have won twice. I carried the photograph to the police station like an accused woman being led into a courtroom. Detective Harris took one look and his face closed up like a fist. He did not say much, only, "We'll sweep the house again. Cameras, neighbors, everything." But the look in his eyes told me he was as worried as I was. He had seen the neat, cold handwriting before. He had seen the photograph of Emily with the red X. He had seen men who did terrible things to hold power. The weight of all that knowledge sat on both our shoulders. They searched the house from top to bottom. They dusted for prints that might not be mine. They checked the gutters, the eaves, even the mail carrier's route. They interviewed delivery drivers and neighbors and the grocery boy who always smiled at me. People I had known for years were suddenly questioned, names logged, lives turned inside out. It felt like my whole neighborhood had become a map of suspicion. I began to look at everyone closely. Mrs. Healy next door had always been sweet, bringing me pies. Mr. Jensen down the street had a cane and a quiet smile. Pastor Allen from the little church on Maple had led Emily's funeral. Each face was suddenly layered with possibilities. If this is what grief does, turn the world into a house of mirrors, then I was drowning. And yet, sometimes the truth is in the small, stupid things. A forgotten receipt, a smudge of grease on a mailbox, the way a van idles a little too long on a dead-end road. That's how it started. A rookie detective, someone Harris trusted to fetch coffee and run errands, came in with a grainy printout from a traffic camera. It showed a delivery van parked outside my house 2 nights ago. Its side blank and white like so many delivery vans. The timestamp fit the window when the photograph had to have been taken. The plate was partially visible, 3 letters and a number. It wasn't enough on its own, but it was a thread. We followed the thread. The van had come from a small logistics company that worked with local businesses. The company owner, a man named Perez, checked his records and frowned. "We never send trucks this late," he said quietly. "But I see one of our units logged out last week. Driver was Samuel Price." The room went cold. Samuel. The man who fired on the officers. The man whose van had once held the terrible bundle wrapped in plastic. Samuel, who had one foot still tethered to Richard's world. Harris's jaw tightened. "We need to trace who hired Samuel that night. Who paid him." He said it like a command, but I heard the desperation underneath. He was chasing a ghost, and every lead was a rope that might break. They followed Samuel's route. It led to a small storefront on the edge of town. A hobby camera shop that doubled as a photo developing service. The owner, an older woman named Elise, remembered a man who came in late, paid cash, and asked for prints of certain frames she'd developed from his memory card. She remembered because he'd been nervous. He'd asked for his prints to be delivered to an anonymous box. The detectives took her statement and left with a stack of paper that smelled like fixer fluid and secrets. At the lab, they found the memory card. On it were dozens of photos. Parking lots, hospital doors, me shuffling my feet in the lobby. Most were blurred, but one clear shot showed an angle that hurt. An image taken from inside my garden shed, looking out toward my kitchen window. Someone had been inside my property. They matched boot prints in the shed to a mud pattern Samuel had on his shoes when arrested. He hadn't acted alone. Someone had let him in. The name that came up like a hidden stitch stunned the room into silence when Harris said it. Key registered at the locksmith, number 22B. The recipient, Linda Matthews. Time stopped. Linda, who had been my rock, my shelter, the woman who'd wrapped me in towels and brought me tea at 3 in the morning. Linda, whose hand had held mine when I woke in that hospital bed. The world tilted. I felt like I was watching myself from the outside, seeing the wavering of my hands bring a phone to my ear and dial the detective's number. Harris didn't jump to conclusions. He's a good man. He knew better than to arrest a friend based on a paper trail. But I watched the way his eyes lingered on Linda when she came down to the station for questioning. He watched her movements. He watched the tilt of her smile and the way she tucked her hair behind an ear. The two of them sat at the table like actors who had practiced their lines. Linda seemed shocked. "They have it wrong," she said. "I would never collaborate with Richard. I loved Emily." Her hands were steady on the table. Her eyes were steady too. She answered every question, gave alibis, and offered consistency. She had checked into a diner that evening, she said, had receipts stamped and staff who would confirm. But receipts can be forged. Cameras can be skipped. People can be paid. The case folder grew heavy with possibilities that always seemed to split into more questions. I wanted to believe Linda. I wanted to sleep in her arms and let the world melt away. I held on to pictures of her laughing in my kitchen, the casseroles she'd brought. I whispered to myself that grief makes you look for traitors where there are none. But there's a second truth. If you pretend the possibility away, you can be set up to be surprised, and surprises are how monsters find you. They watched Linda for days. They tracked her phone, her coffee purchases, her steps. At times she seemed unbearably weary, who wouldn't be? And at times she seemed oddly composed, her guilt like a shadow that refused to darken her face. The detectives found nothing overt. No secret accounts, no sudden cash withdrawals, no hidden burner phones. But the locksmith key was real. The prints or the signature had matched. Someone had given Samuel access. Someone I trusted might have handed him that chance. For a week, I tiptoed through my own life. I answered the door with a baseball bat. I peered through curtains, counted cars, checked mail twice. The neighborhood's ordinary Sunday felt like an enemy's ceremony. Kids played, a dog barked, the mailman hummed, and the sun shone like nothing had changed. But inside my chest, a small volcano sputtered and grew hotter by the hour. Then the extreme event that seared the rest of the chapter into my memory happened. It was late, nearly midnight. Rain had come down in sheets, pounding the roof like fists. I was alone in the kitchen, making tea because habit is one of the last things grief cannot steal. The only light on was over the sink. The house smelled of lemon and wet raincoats. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "We have what we want. Tonight." My hands turned the cup to stone. I felt bile climb my throat. The back door was locked. The dogs were quiet. I called Harris. No answer. The call went to voicemail. Panic is a loud thing, but I didn't make a sound. Instead, I moved toward the back door slowly, like someone walking through a house of mirrors. The mud by the back steps had fresh prints. They led to the garden shed. My heart stopped. I reached for the doorknob and then saw the motion at the far edge of the yard. Someone dragging a body blanket toward a waiting van. My voice tore out of me. "Linda!" I screamed. The rain swallowed it. I dropped the cup. It shattered against the tile. Headlights sliced the night.
A van's door barreled shut.
In a desperate, horror-driven lurch, I staggered into the yard. The van peeled away, tires hissing, and as it rounded the corner, I saw her, Linda, bowed in the passenger seat, her arms bound, her mouth gagged. Her eyes found mine for a single split second. There was a flash of recognition, a look that held both apology and terror. Then the van was swallowing distance, a black blot against the wet road. Everything afterward is a smear. The rain, my hands, my knees on the wet grass, the scream that would not stop. I tried to run after them, but the van was gone. I banged on neighbors' doors until someone called 911. Harris arrived with a dozen officers 10 minutes later, faces like stone, boots crushing mud. They scoured the neighborhood, but the trail had already cooled. Someone had taken Linda right from my yard. The locksmith key, the photograph, the phone text, Someone had been inside my house and now someone I loved was being driven away into the dark. As they carried me upstairs, past the police tape and the blue lights, Detective Harris leaned in close and said, barely above a whisper, "They're organized. This wasn't random." His eyes were hollow. "We have to assume we've got more than one enemy." I clung to his jacket like a drowning thing. "Find her," I begged. "Please. Find Linda." He nodded, and he meant it. But his nod didn't stop the cold, spreading like ink through my body. Richard was dead. That was what I had believed. But the network he built, friends, hired hands, shadows who answered at a whisper, still moved. He had taught people how to disappear into the night, how to do the cruelest things without blinking. That night the lesson sat heavy and simple in my mind. When evil is organized, it doesn't die with one body. It spreads, it mutates, and most dangerously, it hides in places you would never expect. The life lesson I clutched like a lifeline was not the one I would have written on a Hallmark card. Trust your gut, and protect the ones you love. But also, know that sometimes the people who help you are the same ones who must be saved from themselves. The final moment of the chapter is the last thing I remember with terrible clarity. As Harris and officers fanned out into the wet night, my phone buzzed again. A video this time, from the same unknown number. I opened it with hands that no longer felt like mine. The screen showed a blurred interior of a van. Linda was there, gagged but alive. Hands moved in the frame. Two men talking in low voices. The camera turned toward the driver who looked up. For the first time, I saw him clearly. The face of one of Richard's old crew. The one who had smiled at my wedding, who had once carried my boxes when I moved. He grinned at the camera and in a voice like scraping metal he said, "Tell her the game's just begun." Then the video ended. The phone went dead. The rain kept falling. My world had been cleaved in two, before the van and after. The rain didn't stop for days. It poured as though the heavens themselves mourned, soaking the streets, flooding the gutters, and making the world look like a blurred watercolor painting. But inside me, the storm was worse. Linda was gone. Taken. And every second that passed was another second she slipped further from me. Further into the hands of men who had already proven they knew how to kill without remorse. Detective Harris barely slept. He and his team combed through the video frame by frame, trying to catch a license plate, a reflection, even a sign on the side of the road. But the men were smart. They'd blurred most of the surroundings, cut the feed, and uploaded it from a burner phone. "They're taunting you," Harris said grimly, tossing the useless phone onto the table. "They want you afraid." I laughed bitterly, though there was no humor in it. They don't need to want me afraid. They already have me. But under my fear, something else was stirring, anger. Richard had taken Emily. Now his shadow had taken Linda. They weren't just destroying me. They were feeding on me, circling like wolves, testing how far they could push before I broke. And I swore to myself, I would not break. The first clue came unexpectedly. A letter, slipped under my front door in the middle of the night, just like before. My hands trembled as I picked it up, praying it wasn't another photo. But this time it wasn't. It was a map. A crude drawing of the old industrial district by the river. One warehouse was marked with a red X. Scrawled at the bottom, "If you want her back, come alone." My stomach dropped. A trap. Of course it was. Harris told me not to even think about going. "It's bait, Margaret," he warned. "You walk in there, they'll have 2 prisoners instead of 1. But all I could see was Linda's face, gagged and terrified. The thought of doing nothing, of letting her suffer, was worse than the thought of dying. So elite. I waited until Harris finally closed his eyes at the station, exhaustion pulling him under. I slipped out, my old raincoat clinging to me as I drove through the storm. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Every bump on the road felt like a heartbeat in my chest. When I reached the warehouse, the wind howled through broken windows. Rusted doors groaned as they swayed. The place reeked of oil and mildew. I stepped inside, every sense screaming at me to turn back. The floor was littered with broken glass, old pallets, and the faint sound of dripping water. "Linda!" My voice cracked, echoing through the cavernous space. "Linda, are you here?" A muffled cry answered me. I ran toward the sound, heart racing. And there she was, tied to a chair, ropes digging into her wrists, duct tape across her mouth. Her eyes widened when she saw me, shaking her head violently as if to scream, "No, don't come closer." Too late. The overhead lights blazed to life. And from the shadows, figures stepped forward. 3 men, all in dark jackets, faces half hidden. But I recognized one immediately. Samuel. The same man who had driven Richard's van. The same man who should have been locked away after the first arrest. Somehow he was free again. "Well, well," Samuel sneered, twirling a knife in his hand. "The old lady came all by herself. Just like Richard said she would." Hearing his name was like a knife to my chest. Richard. Even dead, he was still orchestrating this madness. He had left behind instructions, allies, and monsters who worshipped him enough to keep going. "You took everything from me," I spat, surprising even myself with the venom in my voice. "You think you'll scare me into crawling into a grave? You're wrong." Samuel smirked. "We don't need to scare you, Grandma. We just need to finish what he started." The other 2 men closed in. One pulled out a length of chain, the other a crowbar. My body froze, fear threatening to swallow me whole. But then my eyes darted to the side. An old fire alarm box, half rusted but still intact. With everything I had left, I lunged toward it. My shoulder screamed in pain, but my hand slammed down on the lever. The warehouse exploded with sound. A siren wailed, sprinklers burst to life, drenching everyone in icy water. The men cursed, momentarily blinded. "Run, Linda!" I shouted, racing toward her chair. Samuel roared and lunged at me, knife flashing. I barely dodged, his blade grazing my arm. The pain was sharp, but adrenaline kept me moving. I reached Linda, tearing at the ropes with trembling hands. She sobbed against the tape, her eyes begging me to hurry. Behind us, the men stumbled through the spray, shouting orders, the sound of boots splashing in water. Finally, the rope snapped free. I ripped the tape from her mouth and she gasped for air. "Margaret, we have to go." But as we staggered toward the exit, a figure blocked our path. Samuel, drenched, eyes blazing with hatred, knife raised high. "You don't get away this time," he snarled. And in that moment I knew either he would kill us or I would have to stop him. Forever. The warehouse echoed with the sound of rushing water. The alarm screaming like 1,000 angry voices. Linda clung to my arm, trembling, her breath coming in sobs. Samuel stood between us and the exit, his knife gleaming under the stuttering emergency lights. The 2 other men circled behind us, blocking off any chance of escape. My chest tightened. We were cornered. Samuel smirked, his wet hair plastered to his forehead. "Richard always said you were stubborn. Said it would take a storm to break you." He raised the knife. "Lucky for us tonight, it's pouring." Fear clawed at me, but then I felt it. Emily's diary pressing against my chest under my coat. Her last words echoed in my mind. "Promise you won't let him win." I stepped forward, pulling Linda behind me. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "You'll never be Richard. And you'll never break me." Samuel's grin faltered. Just for a second. Then he roared and lunged. Time slowed. I saw the knife glint, saw Linda scream, saw the water dripping from the rafters. My eyes darted to a length of broken pipe on the ground. My hand shot out, fingers wrapping around the cold metal. As Samuel came at me, I swung with everything I had. The pipe connected with his wrist. The knife clattered to the floor, skidding across the wet concrete. He howled in rage and swung at me with his free hand, knocking me hard against a support beam. My vision blurred, stars dancing before my eyes. Linda shrieked, but I shouted back, "Run! Get out!" She hesitated, torn, then stumbled toward the side exit. The 2 other men lunged to stop her. But just as they grabbed her arm, bang! Gunfire split the air. Detective Harris burst through the warehouse doors, officers flooding in behind him, weapons raised. "Police! Drop your weapons!" The 2 men froze, hands shooting up. But Samuel didn't. With a wild scream, he lunged at me again, his face twisted with pure hatred. I barely had time to raise the pipe. We struggled, slipping in the water, his hands like iron around my throat. My lungs burned. My vision dimmed. I could feel myself slipping away. Then, another gunshot. Samuel jerked, his eyes wide, blood blooming across his chest. He staggered backward, collapsing into the shallow pool of water at our feet. His lifeless eyes stared at the ceiling, mouth frozen in a twisted half-smile. It was over. I collapsed to the floor, coughing, tears mingling with the spray from the sprinklers. Harris rushed to me, kneeling at my side. "Margaret, are you all right?" I nodded weakly, though my whole body shook. "Linda, is she safe?" "She's safe," Harris said firmly. "We've got her. It's done." Linda stumbled into my arms, sobbing. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered. I held her tight, closing my eyes as relief washed over me. The officers dragged the other men away in cuffs. Samuel's body was covered with a sheet. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air around me felt lighter. But as Harris helped me to my feet, I looked back at Samuel's lifeless form. And I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's shadow still lingered. Evil like his doesn't vanish with a bullet. It seeps into people, into places, into memories. And though his accomplices were caught, though Samuel was dead, I knew the scars would remain with me forever. Later, as I sat in my quiet house, Emily's diary on my lap, I whispered to the empty room, "I kept my promise, baby. He didn't win." I looked into the camera one last time, my hands trembling but my voice steady. Thank you for watching my story. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss another one. And tell me in the comments, from which part of the country are you watching from? Until next time, stay safe. And hold your loved ones close. Because if my story taught me anything, it was this. Life can be stolen in a heartbeat. But love is what survives. Broken heart.